Welcome to Dev Dive-In and the fourth part of our HTML Basics series. In today's video, we'll introduce 4 HTML tags that are commonly used on every website. While the tags themselves are easy to understand, there are some important concepts that you should be aware of. So let's dive in. To start off, we have an HTML document with 3 placeholder paragraphs, and I've added a bit of CSS just to make things a little more pretty. The first thing we'll look at is how to bold text. So choose the word that you want to bold and wrap it in a strong tag. There's also a B tag, which does the exact same thing. If you hit save and refresh, you'll see that both of them are indeed bolded. Now you'll want to use strong over B, and this is because B stands for bold, and bold is very much a visual thing. And if I were to go to this site on something like a screen reader which reads the text, bold means absolutely nothing, whereas strong can indicate how it should be read. Italicizing text is very similar to how bold is handled. So the first thing you want to do is wrap your text in an EM tag, which stands for emphasis. And again, there is another tag, which is an I tag. So if I were to save this, refresh, it's hard to see, but it is indeed italicized. And again, for the same reason, you'll want to use EM over I, because I stands for italic, and that really has no meaning to a screen reader. Whereas emphasis, the reader can emphasize the text properly. Now let's say we want to add a link to this page. Choose the word that you want to turn into a link, and then wrap it in an A tag. A stands for anchor, and the reason why it's called anchor is because when HTML was first created, it would only link to different parts of the document, and those points were called anchor points. So when someone clicked on it, it would jump down to that anchor point. You could still do that, but more often than not, we're linking to different pages instead. Now you might have noticed the A tag has an href here. This is called an attribute, and it's an important concept that all tags use. Attributes are a way of modifying the functionality of a tag. And in this case, the href tells where the link is going to go to. So when I click on an A tag, it's going to take me to a twisted.html. So if I save this and refresh, when I click on it, it will take me to twisted.html. Now this is just a HTML file that I created already that lives in the same folder as my index.html. And you can see that here. This brings us to another important concept about absolute URLs and relative URLs. For this, we're going to have to look at the URL and all the different parts of it. At the beginning of any URL is the protocol. A protocol is just a set of rules that defines how the browser is going to communicate with the server. With web, we use HTTP and HTTPS. This stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, because we're sending hypertext HTML. HTTPS is just a secure way of sending HTML. The data that's sent to the server is encrypted, so nobody can read it in between the browser and the server. Next in the URL is the domain name. In its simplest form, this points to the server that the request has to be sent to. So if we're going to google.com, we want to point to Google servers. After the domain is the port. Now typically you wouldn't see this on the web normally. It is assumed when you use HTTP, it is port 80, and when you're using HTTPS, it's port 443. These are hidden by the browser, so you don't have to type it in. But typically when you're working locally on your own machine, you'd have to type in a port. This is because port 80 and port 443 are reserved by your computer, so we can't use those for web development. We need to use other ports. Commonly used ones are port 3000, port 8080, and port 8443. But really it can be anything as long as your computer isn't using them. Ports are a way for servers to organize what type of data will be coming in. So if something comes from port 443 or port 80, they know that it's coming from the browser. This also allows them to block any unwanted traffic that they don't want. Lastly, we have the path. This just points to the folder structure and the files on the server. So if I had a folder called test on my server, I could access it by using /test. And if I had an index.html file, I could access it by /test/index.html. Now that we understand the parts of the URL, we can now talk about absolute and relative URLs. An absolute URL is like giving someone the exact address of a place, including the street, name, city, and country. Here's an example. It tells your computer exactly where to find something on the internet. A relative URL is like telling someone where to find something based on where they are right now. You might say, it's just around the corner, or go one step back and then to the right. In web terms, it's a shorter way of saying where the file is in relation to the current page. For example, if you're on a page like this, and you say images/pic.jpg, it means look for the picture in the products folder of this website. There is one caveat though with relative URLs. There are two different types of relative URLs. The one that I showed is relative to the folder. You can also do it so it's relative to the root of the path. So if we took the same example of images/pic.jpg and we add a slash to the very beginning, the URL would end up looking like this. It replaces the products. This is because having a / at the beginning is the same as saying I want to replace the entire path. So if there's a path that's already existing, it would be replaced. Okay, now we know about URLs. Now let's show a real life example. Here I've opened twisted.html. And inside we have an anchor tag that points to index.html. You'll see the / at the beginning, which means it's going to replace the path. And when I click on it, you'll notice it doesn't work. And this is because when I first opened this website, I double clicked on the index.html to open it in the browser. Now this gives it a file protocol, and you'll notice there is no domain here, just the path to the file. So when we have a / at the beginning, it's going to replace the path with what is here, but I don't have the file there. So to fix this, we can just get rid of the /, hit save, refresh, and when I click back, it's going to take me to the index.html. When I click twisted, I'll go back. Now, if we wanted to use this /, we're going to have to install a VS Code extension called Live Server. So if we come to this extensions and type in Live Server, it'll be the first one there, and you just click on it, and there will be an install button here. I've already installed it. You just click it, and it'll take a second to install, and you just close this out. Now at the bottom right hand of your screen, you'll see this Go Live. You just click it. And this is going to start a server on port 5500. So whatever folder you're currently working in, this is going to allow the browser to point directly to it. So we look up in the URL now, you'll see this 127.0.0.1. That is your local host, and that's just pointing to your computer. The server is your computer essentially. And the port is 5500, and /twisted is the path. Now when I click back, it's going to work because we're using a server now. And the path points to the root of the server. So if we come back to my files, this is the root of the server. And index and twisted are at the same level. Now let's look at the image tag. We go back to the twisted page. You'll see this img tag here. And the attributes are src for source, and this just points to where the image is. I can use a / here as well, and it would work just the same. I should mention using a / at the beginning is probably the preferred way of doing it. You rarely see links without the /. It's a lot easier to specify the root to something if you say the whole path instead of relative to where the user currently is. The other attribute is the alt tag. This is for screen readers. So the image won't show up on a screen reader because it's just reading the text. And this is what it's going to read instead of showing the image. Now, one thing you might have noticed with this image tag is that it doesn't have a closing tag. Certain tags don't need closing tags. An image is one of those. It's called a self-closing tag. Now, you might see it like this, or you might see it without. Both work. This is just a way of saying this is closing itself. I don't need that extra closing tag. Images don't need a closing tag because you don't need to place anything inside of it. You don't need to define text inside of it. So if you look at a paragraph, anything in between it is going to be a paragraph, but that doesn't really make sense for the image because all it needs is the source. And that's 4 easy HTML tags. We covered bold, italic, anchor links, and images. We've also covered some important concepts. With these, you're on your way to creating your own website. If you haven't checked it out already, we have a bunch of other videos in our HTML Basics series. They go over things like setting up your web development environment and creating your first website. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Comments are always welcome, and thanks for watching.